Welcome to the Women in STEM podcast. Today we'll be discussing all things tech with the fabulous hosts of Hot Girl Code podcast, Lola and Aorthi, both who are full stack engineers at TradeMe and are on a mission to make tech more accessible and inclusive. Let's get started with where both of you began and how you both went on to create Hot Girl Code. How did this amazing podcast come to life?
So, Hot Girls Code started when back in 2022, I actually had COVID. So, unfortunately, I was sick in bed, and I'm one of those people that really struggles not being productive. So, I was in bed, like on my laptop, and I had a bit of a fever dream. And I was just thinking, like, oh, me and Aorthi talk about tech stuff all the time. Aorthi is like my work bestie. She's a bit of a mentor to me. And we talk about a lot of things related to girls in tech and technical concepts. And it just kind of occurred to me, like, we should include more people in this conversation. So in this state, in this sort of fever dream, I messaged Aorthi and I said, oh my God, you know how we love to talk about tech and we always give each other support. And you know how we love communicating and things like that. And Aorthi, without missing a beat, says, are you asking me to start a podcast?
Yeah, I instantly knew what Lola was going to ask me. I'd actually been thinking about it myself because, especially as women starting out in the industry, it can feel kind of lonely. And when we started out, we really did rely on each other so much. And it made such a difference to just feel less othered, feel less alone, feel like someone else that gets it. And we just wanted to, bring more people into that conversation, have more people feel like we can be the voices in their ears, keeping them going, because we kept each other going.
Yeah, it was like the amount of support that I got from Aorthi and that I gave to Aorthi. We were kind of like, hey, we should expand this circle, include more people in the conversation because it's really beneficial to us. And we think that it could be beneficial to lots of other women in tech.
And not only that, we also feel like a lot of the examples about technology out there are often geared towards men or more stereotypically boyish examples and stereotypes. And so we like giving a different way of explaining things, a different perspective.
Now, actually, before we continue, would actually love to hear a bit of your take on something. So us at Hot Girls Code, we're all about making tech concepts more approachable. So we're wondering if you could explain cloud computing to us in a true Hot Girls Code style. Like, how would you explain the cloud to someone at a brunch?
Wow, that is a great question. Funny enough, I oftentimes get a lot of people asking me about the cloud, and they always find it quite an intimidating subject to cover. I would say basically the cloud is a way of storing and accessing data, software, and services over the internet instead of using your own computer or server. It's essentially like using somebody else's powerful computer. But if I'm going to explain it in a hot girl kind of way, then I would say um, a cloud vendor is like a luxury fashion brand. And in cloud vending, we have a bunch of different cloud vendors. For example, some of the biggest players like AWS. So maybe you could compare this to a Louis Vuitton that offers versatility and dependability on a range of different premium services. And then we have Azure, which is also known for its seamless integration. So you could say Azure is kind of like Gucci's ready to wear. And then we have Google Cloud Platform, which is like Prada in a way. It's quite trendy, innovative, and specializes in cutting edge areas such as AI and analytics. So cloud just enables you to have much more powerful resources. It enables companies to have the ability to have more flexibility, enables them to have more scalability and accessibility so that they can access their data anywhere in the world. And the different vendors simply just specialize in different things.
I love that so much.
It was true Hot Girls Code style as well, taking those concepts that maybe seem a bit foreign and scary and those buzzwords, and then like putting it in relatable things that we understand, like Prada and Gucci and all the other good stuff.
Yes, great. Speaking of breaking down concepts, your podcast is doing an amazing job at demystifying technical topics. What has been your favorite technical topic to cover so far?
Oh, there are so many of them, and it's really hard to choose. But I think one of my personal favorites is we did an episode on IDEs, so integrated development environments. It's where developers write code. And a lot of the examples that when I was learning about coding back in the day, it was always about how it's like your toolbox and how this thing was like a hammer and this one's like a wrench. And for me, I was like, I don't find that relatable. I don't really get that. And then I remember I had this brainwave and I like messaged Lola and I was like, a makeup kit. And ID is like a makeup kit. Why has no one ever come up with this example before? And the more we thought about it, the more the example worked and it made sense. It was one of those things where it really showed that all it took was a different perspective. And it's really cool because we'll talk to students that are at university and they will call out their episode being like, oh, that's the episode that helped me understand how to actually use my IDE properly. And it was really valuable to me. And it's finally how I got it. And that's just so rewarding.
It is so good. And I loved that example so much. Another one that I love is back when we did an episode on databases and we were kind of explaining what a database table is. And we were using examples from Twilight. So we're like, let's say you have a database table and you want to have an entry for all of the characters in Twilight. So we're talking about Bella, we're talking about Jacob, we're talking about Edward. And it's like explaining things in a way that we understand. And the feedback we've gotten is that it's a lot more relatable. So yeah, and it is really fun for us to come up with these kind of creative takes on technical concepts.
Definitely. I really enjoy your episodes and I found it really helpful. You are both full stack engineers. You are both full stack developers at TradeMe, New Zealand's largest auctioning site. What is it like working on a platform that so many Kiwis use on a daily basis, especially as I'm somebody here in the UK speaking with you?
It's definitely rewarding. I think it's quite cool working for a company because in New Zealand, TradeMe is really well known. It's kind of like if you're selling something online, you're probably going to sell it on TradeMe. So it's quite cool when you tell people you work there and there's an immediate recognition. And they mostly kind of, they're like, oh, okay, cool. I sort of know what you do. Sometimes I do get asked, like, why does TradeMe need software developers? The website is done, right? Like, it's up there. What else do you need to do on it? So then you have to do a bit of explaining about maintenance of software and the fact that, once you've built the software, you can't just leave it there because, things happen, incidents occur, technology gets upgraded. So yeah, it's a really cool place to work. And it's a really cool experience working somewhere that is used widely.
Yeah, definitely. And so many people in our lives use it. And it's great because we have really dedicated user base, like a really dedicated user base. And, when you change things and people don't like it, you hear it. And I always joke, I actually enjoy it when we get negative feedback because it means it actually matters to people and people actually care about it. Back to what Lola was saying, so many people don't realize that people work at TradeMe and they think it's like quite an unusual thing. They're like, oh, I just thought that existed. And talking about our tech story and how some people think it's unusual that we work at a website that seems to always have existed. I'm really curious, as someone that's talked to a lot of women in tech, what are some of the unexpected career paths that you've encountered and any stories that you've come across that have kind of surprised you?
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate enough to speak to many women in tech because of my podcast. I've had people with cybersecurity backgrounds on. I've had an analog astronaut on, which I had not heard of that before, but it's essentially somebody who specializes in space and they are able to go to NASA and stay in a simulated space-like conditions, and so they specialize in that. I've also had recently a physicist and inventor. Her name was Dr. Luha, and she has 6 decades of experience. And she is still inventing to this day, and she does inventions for NASA and really impactful things. So I think those are just a snippet of some of the amazing women that I've had on my podcast that I had no idea that these type of careers existed.
I love that someone's been inventing for 6 decades. That's when it's their true passion, right? Like it's what gets them out of bed in the morning.
Yes,
And
definitely.
it's so interesting just how many jobs there are in technology and in STEM in general. So one thing that we've done on Hot Girls Code is we have a series called Exploring Tech Jobs, where we interview people in a whole bunch of different roles within the tech industry, because some of these roles we'd heard of, but even we didn't really know the ins and outs of it. So yeah, I think it's really cool. Like, I've never heard of an analog astronaut. Was that it? I'd never heard of an analog astronaut before. So it's so cool to hear that there are so many career options for people to find what they're passionate about.
Yes, definitely. And speaking of inspiration, your podcast aims to help women that feel like they want to belong in tech. What feedback have you received from your listeners that feel like they're really stuck?
We are so fortunate. We get a lot of incredible DMs from people, and it's something that every time we see a DM from someone that's like positive, it means so much. Like, we get feedback about people saying like, oh, I'm the only woman in my team or the only woman in my class, and listening to your podcast is what's helping me, push through and fight the masculine energy, or it helps, empower me. There are other people that have said, oh, I always struggled with understanding some of these technical concepts, and you guys and your podcast has made me realize I'm not the problem. It's just that no one's ever explained it to a way in that no one's ever explained it to me in a way that makes sense to me. They've always done it one certain way. And things like that, like hearing that what we're doing is actually making a difference in people's lives, like that absolutely sticks with us. It absolutely means the world. And when we put these things out there, we're like, we're trying to make it relatable and fun. What if people hate it? What if it isn't relatable? And then hearing other people say, no, actually, this helps it make sense in my head. This is like, we had someone that was like, I've been in the tech industry for years. I've always used the solid principles. I never understood why until I listened to your episode. And then I was like, oh, and it's just, doing those little brainwave moments for people. It's just incredible.
Yeah, 100%. Because, we produce these episodes and we have no idea what kind of reaction they're going to have, or if people are going to really relate to the content, or if it's going to be useful. So I think it's so rewarding for us. And it really drives us to keep going when we have people reaching out to us and they're saying, oh, hey, I'm in my first year of computer science. I'm the only girl in my class, and I was thinking of dropping out, but then I found your podcast and now I feel like I can keep going. So yeah, it's the messages like that that honestly inspire us.
Now let's talk about the name Hot Girl Code. I love how you're challenging the typical tech stereotypes. And what are often the reactions that you get to your podcast name?
Yeah, we definitely get some interesting reactions to Hot Girls Code. I would say the majority of people love the name. You think about going on your hot girl walk, you chuck on some Hot Girls Code, it all makes sense to a majority of the population. But unfortunately, there are a small number of people who seem to be very angry that we decided to name our podcast Hot Girls Code. And we have had some social media backlash or comments from people, and it'll be like a photo of me and Aorthi, and it says something about Hot Girls Code. And they literally say, what do you mean? There's no hot girls in this photo. But luckily, Aorthi and I are very thick-skinned, and, we're able to just laugh that off. And honestly, I think the name Hot Girls Code, to me, it has a lot to do with kind of the confidence you have to embody as a woman in tech, because tech is obviously such a male-dominated industry. And I think even just taking that step and saying, hey, you know what? I'm a hot girl. That's the kind of confidence you need to have in order to stand out and not be kind of pressed out of the industry.
And a lot of the audience of Hot Girls Code are women, but we also have men that listen to us. And it's really funny because sometimes they'll be like, am I a hot girl? And we'll be like, yeah, hot girl's a state of mind. You too can be a hot girl. And so we'll have like grown ass men that are married with kids. They're like, I'm a hot girl.
Yes, I love your confidence and your boldness. You both graduated with impressive engineering degrees. What would you tell your first year self about university now? Quick break. Before we get back to our conversation, I want to remind you to follow, rate, and review the Women in STEM podcast on whatever streaming platform. Your support really helps us to reach more listeners and continue to bring inspiring stories and valuable insight. Don't forget to share this episode with your friends and colleagues who might be interested in learning a bit more about women in STEM. Also, make sure to check out our new LinkedIn page, the Women in STEM podcast, where you get to see some of the latest advancements in technology and learn more about women in STEM.
That's a really good question. And honestly, I think the thing I would tell my first year self would be to just chill out a little bit. I think I was such a little perfectionist at university. And I think also sometimes I was so eager to be perfect that I didn't even, sometimes I held back from trying new things. And I think the biggest times I've learned within my career and within university was when I tried to do things that I didn't think I would do perfectly, that I didn't think would go well. And then I learned from those experiences. So I think I would say, like, don't hold yourself to perfection. Sometimes getting things done is actually going to be way more valuable to you than getting things perfect.
I think for me, if I were to kind of give advice to my first year self, I think a big part of it would be don't compare yourself to others. Like one thing I really struggled with doing a software engineering degree was we'd come out of exams and it was mostly guys. They'd be talking about their answers and it was something totally different than what I had put. So I just assumed, oh, I must have gotten that terribly wrong. Like these guys are obviously so much smarter than me because they were really confident in what they were saying. And then we got the test results back, and I had actually done better than these guys who were talking about it with all of their false confidence. So I think I would tell myself not to compare myself to others and to just take it one step at a time.
And how do you see the landscape of tech changing, specifically in New Zealand? As you know, my podcast is a global podcast, but you are the first New Zealand people that I've spoken to. So I'm really intrigued to find out what the tech scene is like there.
It is a vibrant tech scene down in New Zealand. Obviously, we're quite a small country in comparison to a lot of the world, but I would say there's always exciting things in tech. Obviously, the great thing about technology is it is so global. So, we'll be working with people across the world. I recently did a project and we had stakeholders in Germany. I think one cool thing is the fact that no matter where you are located globally, there is that like interconnectedness through tech. Specifically around women in tech, I see a lot more support. I see a lot more companies taking initiatives for like diversity, equity, and inclusion, a lot more sponsorship programs, mentorship programs. And yeah, in New Zealand, there are quite a lot of great community events focused for women in tech and other initiatives similar to Hot Girls Code. So yeah, it's an exciting time to be here.
And one thing I like to tell a lot of the younger people that are coming into the tech industry is one of the things that is exciting about this time is we're part of a generation where there are women that have been in the tech industry now for 30, 40 years, and they're now in charge. They now have power and influence, and they're able to action the things that potentially they didn't have back in the day. And sometimes you look at the stats around women in tech globally, and women in tech leadership is actually going down and things like that. And that can make you feel really disheartened and worried. But one thing I really remind people is we're in such a different position to where we were 30, 40 years ago. Now there are people who are starting companies, who are leading technical organizations that have that diverse lens, that are able to actually action change and do things that they want to do.
No, oftentimes when it comes specifically to coding, women oftentimes feel intimidated by technical tests, technical interviews. And I was just wondering if you had any tips or experiences that you could share with the audience.
That is a great question. We actually have an entire episode about acing your next technical interview that came from a lot of our experiences. And I think one of the main, biggest tips that we gave from that episode, I can't remember which one it is off the top of my head, but look up how to ace your next technical interview. The Hot Girls Code podcast will come up. We go through all the different types. But I think the biggest thing is practicing and giving the problems a go. If you know that it's going to be a technical test where you're going to have to write code in front of people, actually write that code and practice, and maybe pair program with someone so that you get used to it. Because sometimes that's the thing that throws you off. It's not actually your skill, it's the nerves on the day. So whether it's verbally explaining technical solutions or writing out code in front of someone, pull in a buddy. They don't even have to be technical. They're not there to like fact check you or check your answers. They're just there for you to get used to being observed while you're doing something technical.
Another thing to remember with technical interviews is just don't judge yourself too harshly. Like from my experience, I was in a technical interview and I was coding in front of people and I just couldn't figure it out. And in my head, I'm telling myself like, wow, you've really screwed this up. You're doing terribly. And you know, this isn't going well. And I didn't end up finishing the problem and I was really harsh on myself. And then I found out later I actually did get through to the next stage. So sometimes they'll give you problems that they aren't necessarily expecting you to finish or to complete perfectly, but they just want to see your thinking and kind of how you step through that problem. So yeah, I would definitely recommend take it one step at a time. Don't be too harsh on yourself. Just do as best as you can in that moment. And even if you don't solve it completely or you don't do as well as you would have hoped for, you honestly still might have done enough.
Yeah, I actually had a very similar experience once where I was in a technical interview and I was near tears because I thought I was doing such a bad job. Like as soon as the interview was done, it was a virtual one. I, closed my laptop and burst into tears because I thought I did a terrible job. And afterwards, they were like, we were so impressed. You asked great questions. You could tell you were really thinking about it all. We loved your way. And I ended up getting offered the job. And I was like, I thought I did so terribly that I cried for like an hour after. Turns out I actually didn't do a bad job.
And the thing is, like, sometimes they're actually more looking at your communication and your way of thinking and breaking down a problem as opposed to, oh, can she get this one line of code correct? Oh, no, that was a syntax error. Like they're sometimes looking at it from a more broad level. So, yeah, don't judge yourself too harshly, or at least start crying once you've closed the laptop.
Great advice. I also wanted to ask you both individually what actually made you get into engineering? What made you get into full stack developer? What's been your journey?
Well, I honestly did not know what I wanted to do in high school, but I really enjoyed physics and maths. So then I was like, okay, I guess I'll do engineering. And I thought that I would end up being a civil engineer, with my little hard hat and high vis vest. Luckily, that didn't end up happening. So I did my first year of engineering and I did a coding paper. And that was my first experience ever properly coding. And I actually really enjoyed it. It was this new kind of problem solving with a different tool set or makeup kit that I had never tried before. And I thought it was so cool. So from there, I decided to specialize in software engineering and finish my degree, got an internship. And that is kind of how I ended up as a software developer.
Yeah, so my story is kind of similar to Lola's. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I actually hated physics. I loved maths, but I hated physics. I only took it because my mum made me. She wouldn't let me do drama in my A levels if I didn't also do physics. So that was our compromise. She to this day brings it up. She's like, "Remember how you almost didn't do that subject? That's your entire career." And I was like, "Shh, Mum, let's not talk about that." But basically, I did physics. I had a really incredible physics teacher called Mr. O'Hanlon, and he was just incredible. He made me like physics a lot more. And he would always encourage us to go to university events about engineering. And specifically, there's a student club called the Women in Engineering Network. That's actually where Lola and I eventually met each other in the future. But they would do information evenings for high school students. And I went along to one of those and I was like, this is actually pretty cool. Like, I think I want to do this. So I did engineering and I thought I was going to do mechanical engineering. And similar to Lola, when I did the first year paper for coding, I was like, this is really cool. I'm still quite indecisive though. So I did computer systems engineering rather than software engineering. So that specializes in hardware and software. So it's a bit less deep compared to software engineering, but it just covers hardware and software. So it's a bit more broad. So I had a bit more options in the future. And I knew that by the time I got to like my final year of uni, I could pick electives that made me more focused on software if I wanted to. And so, yeah, then I did that. I did my internship and I really, really liked it. It was interesting because before I did my software internship, I didn't think I actually wanted to work in the tech industry. I was like, oh, this has been fun. Maybe I'll do like consultancy or something. I don't think I'll be a dev. And when I actually got on the job experience, I was like, this is so cool. Why would I do anything else?
Plus one to that. Like before I had actually done an internship as a software developer, I assumed, oh, I'll probably go into leadership or maybe, I don't know, some kind of like non-technical role of some kind. And then I found out what software development is actually like on the job. And it was totally different to this like preconceived